Welcome back to another edition of Maryland Family Matters. My name is Jeff Trimbath, and I have the privilege of leading the Maryland Family Institute in Annapolis, Maryland. We are joined today by a very special guest and longtime friend of mine, a fellow Maryland resident, fellow Anne Arundel County resident, Tim Chapman. Tim is the president of Advancing American Freedom, and we're here today to talk about his organization, why it exists. Tim, welcome to Maryland Family Matters.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me. It's great to see you. And as you mentioned, yes, we have been friends for a very long time. So I've been able to observe and admire your work in the conservative movement and for the principles we all care about. And now you're doing it in Maryland, where it's really needed more than ever. And so many people around this state are really grateful for it. So thanks for having me on. Excited for a conversation.
Thank you, Tim. I wanted to ask you just a little bit about your personal life. Married, family? Tell us a little bit about your family.
Sure. Married with 4 kids. Our oldest is 18, our youngest is 10, and there's a couple in between. And so we moved out to Maryland about 8 years ago. We came from Capitol Hill, but when we ended up with 4 kids on Capitol Hill, it got pretty tight, as you could imagine.
Yeah.
So we needed some more space, and we settled down in Davidsonville, Maryland, which is just a tremendous blessing. And we're navigating all the things that Marylanders navigate: the school systems, the sports schedules, the Chesapeake Bay, which is a great blessing, and everything in between. So that's where we're at.
In that decision, as a conservative who was on Capitol Hill, you had a decision to make moving out. Obviously, the two choices are Virginia and Maryland. You chose Maryland as a conservative. Tell us what was behind that decision.
Yeah, it's interesting. I took a lot of flack for it early because, as you know, we shared some time together at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C., and most of the people who did not live in D.C. lived in Northern Virginia, and there was always sort of people would look down their nose at the idea of moving to Maryland because it's so liberal. But look, there were some very practical considerations for starters. Northern Virginia is pretty pricey. And if you've got 4 kids, and you want them to have some space and you want to have a decent sized yard in a neighborhood, if you're going to Virginia, you're talking about going an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
And to get that same kind of thing. And at that time, the Davidsonville community and other parts of Anne Arundel County were really attractive in terms of like housing prices. And then I do think, I often tell people, yes, Maryland is a blue state, but there are pockets of Maryland that are very conservative, as you know. And we happen to be in a pocket of Maryland that's pretty conservative, and that's not to say that we wouldn't have moved there if it was less so. I think we can live wherever and try to persuade our fellow citizens towards the rightness of our cause. But there are pockets and bases of different places in this state that really are conservative, and I think the challenge for conservatives is just to figure out how to export that to neighboring counties.
What a great word for all of us who are in the state trying to stand for godly biblical values. God calls us to live all over the state, and he can empower us to make an impact wherever we are. What a great example, Tim, that you have just shown us. Tell us a little bit about Advancing American Freedom. This is the organization that you lead. What is the vision, the mission of it? What are you hoping to achieve at Advancing American Freedom?
Well, thanks, Jeff. AAF was founded in 2021. It was founded by Vice President Mike Pence when he left the administration from the Trump-Pence era. I became president of AAF about 2 years ago. I had known Mike Pence for 25 years. I had followed him when I was, a young staffer on Capitol Hill, and he was a backbench member of Congress. I admired his work. He was always a champion for family values, for fiscal conservatism, for strong national defense. He was really a young Reaganite when he came to Washington in the early 2000s. And so I got to know him and loved him, and then had been talking with him over the last 3 years. And we just thought that AAF has an opportunity in today's political climate to build the kind of institution in Washington that stands outside of the day-to-day political struggle.
Mm,
And when I say that, what I mean is red team versus blue team.
yeah,
And not that we don't consider ourselves conservative, we're very conservative. But we think that the moment today really calls for institutions that don't toe the line on everything that their party says they
right.
should toe the line on.
Sure. Yeah.
And look, let's just be clear about this. In today's Washington, the pressure is higher than ever to be
Mm,
aligned with the administration on every policy.
mm,
And I think that's wrong-headed for conservatives to give into that pressure. There are lots of things that Donald Trump has done that are wonderful for the conservative cause. And then there are lots of things that the president has done that are not great. And,
mm,
I'll talk about an issue that I know your institute cares deeply about, the cause for life.
mm, yeah.
The pressure to align with the administration on their view of the right tactics on the life issue is strong, but it would be wrong for conservatives to do it because this administration has consistently backed away from very simple pro-life positions like limiting access to the abortion pill, which is
Mm,
the number one cause of abortions in the United States today. I don't know if many of your viewers and listeners know, but abortions today are higher than they were 4 years ago.
mm,
Okay, there's a real problem there. Despite the victory on Roe v. Wade, the abortion pill has been so proliferate across the United States, and access to it has been so easy that abortions have shifted in that direction. And that's a real problem. And conservatives and pro-lifers in particular should have a higher allegiance than just the political party. The
mm,
allegiance should be to the principle of life. And so you need to be standing up when the FDA refuses to release the study that we all know exists that shows that the abortion pill is incredibly harmful to the health of women,
mm.
not to mention the fact that it's killing babies. Okay, so there are reasons for that, and I think that's what AAF exists to do, is to try to stand outside of that red versus blue shirts for skins environment and say, hey, look, there are real principles at stake here. And by the way, when you do that, the Republican Party gets better. That iron sharpening iron is important for the Republican Party.
It's interesting. You mentioned the red versus blue dynamic, Tim, and it reminds me of a conversation I had just last week. I was in Baltimore County meeting with a very accomplished African American female attorney. My wife and I were meeting with her, and we talked about partisan issues, Republican, Democrat, and she said, "I don't really like to talk in those terms. I am a conservative,
Mm,
but I'm not,
yep,
Republican or Democrat." And so it was just an interesting moment that really gels with what you just said. Our
yep.
allegiance should be to these principles, not necessarily to a political party, either one.
Completely, Jeff. I mean, look, we are in a scrambled political situation right now, and the the dynamic that, especially at the national level, that we face is President Trump is such an enormous personality. A celebrity in his own right, a successful businessman in his own right, somebody who has that kind of celebrity status for decades in the United States. So he sort of blots out the sun in the
Mm,
political environment. And it creates this dynamic where everybody wants all the arguments to be about one person.
yeah.
But I sense right now is a serious fatigue with that. From Democrats and Republicans, people who aren't involved in partisan politics. The Democratic partisans want it to make it all about Trump. The Republican partisans want to make it all about Trump. But rank and file voters across the country are tired of this. And so there's an opportunity in that moment to actually talk about the issues. And I think that's where you start to build coalitions for the future. And to your point, there is an opportunity to build coalitions with strange bedfellows around the issues that really matter. And I think we want to be a part of that at AAF, as I know you are at Maryland Family Institute.
Well, that's right. And anytime we try to get any kind of victory in the state house, it's going to be with building those coalitions with
Right.
folks across the aisle who may share our view on certain issues and who don't on other issues.
Right.
And so we certainly resonate with that. Tell us about the specific work of advancing American freedom, writing, testifying. I mean, I could mention what I know about it, but
Sure.
what's your
Look, we are a fast-growing organization. In December of last year, we had 16 employees. Today, we have 43. Um,
Mm,
and so there's real significant growth here. Many of those employees came from our alma mater, Heritage Foundation. We had some great people come over from the Heritage Foundation, some from other institutes as well. We work on economic policy, we work on family policy, and we work on foreign policy and defense policy.
mhm,
And of those 43 people that work here at our organization, the majority of them are scholars and researchers.
mm,
So we consider ourselves a scholarly research institution first that focuses on principled public policy, but we're not only that. So
mm,
we are determined to write and to comment on the most important issues of the day.
mm,
And that principled public policy is the first thing we organize ourselves around. But then we have two other principles that we think are absolutely pivotal for the organization to be excellent at. And one is to be a coalition builder, to be one of the best coalition builders in the country. And then that's because if you can't just write great principled public policy, you have to build the political coalitions to
mm,
advance that principled public policy. So we lean in on coalition building with other groups and with entities across the country. And then the third thing that we want to be known for is building a talent development pipeline.
mm,
Where you can actually bring people to Washington. I think one of the greatest challenges we have as conservatives right now is losing the next generation. And the next generation, like if you look at voters, 18 to 35 right now, they're going back and forth between Democrats and Republicans because they don't really have a solid, firm footing. And you need people coming into the movement, and they need to be grounded in the principles that are permanent. And so we are right now investing heavily we've just hired a director to oversee that work, hiring some people at the state level
mm.
to work on that, building partnerships with colleges across the country to find the best of the best in those colleges to bring young people into this movement and to give them that firm founding, and then to build an alumni network that sticks together over decades. We want this part of our work to think in decades, not in years.
Yeah. Well, that's a great summary. And one of the aspects of your work that we've been directly participating in at Maryland Family Institute and several of my other colleague organizations is your amicus brief program.
Mm-hmm.
Very active program that's existed for years, I think.
Yep.
And so we're constantly being asked to join to the briefs that you all write, and that you sort of engineer writing on family, on life,
Yep.
on all these issues. And so we're just so grateful for the opportunity to join with AAF on these legal causes. In this environment, that's very helpful for us in Maryland, because the extent to which we can actually pass public policy solutions through Annapolis is very limited. And so if we can make an impact on the federal level at the Supreme Court, that's very helpful for us.
Well, that's great. And thank you, Jeff, for MFI being on those briefs and contributing to the briefs. I think that's a huge help. That when you write an amicus brief like that, and you can actually have state-based institutions with credibility like yours engage, that really helps the credibility of the brief at the court level. So we're proud of that work, but even more proud of coalition partners like MFI.
Let me sort of raise our conversation a little bit, Tim, and ask you what is your greatest sort of policy concern, but both on the federal level that you see, sort of what keeps you up at night, and then also on the state level for here in Maryland. What is the most concern to you?
Well, I think they're actually two sides of the same coin at the federal and the policy level. I think that we're in a tough situation in this country where the American people are, one, rightly fed up, but going in the wrong direction with their frustration. And the frustration leads them to look to Washington as the savior. And so we're in this terrible back and forth pendulum swing where every 4 years we have an election that everyone says is the most important election of our lifetime. And if my side doesn't win, then, we're in real trouble and the country's over and I'm moving to Canada or wherever it is, right? That is incredibly unhealthy for the Republic. And it is anti-Republican in sentiment and design. And the founders wanted the most important work of this nation to be done at the state level, at the local level, where people are closest to their representatives. And I think that's the big problem we face. I mean, look, like I said earlier, I think President Trump has some great things to offer and has done some things that are not great. But my big problem with Trumpism is the notion that Trumpism is going to be the thing that saves this nation. It's not. It's the state capitals across the country. It's the local school boards across the country. It's our communities. It's our civic associations. It's our churches. These are the places where this country will be saved. But we have to have confidence in those institutions to do it. And so this idea that we keep going back and forth and we keep raising the stakes every 4 years, I think that's the biggest challenge for our nation. And I think what it really reflects is a fundamental loss of confidence in ourselves as Americans. And we need to recover that. And so that's why I was so excited to do this podcast with you, because I think institutes like the Maryland Family Institute are the kind of foot soldiers that this movement needs to recover the best of our nation. So that's what I think the big challenge is.
Now, let me take those concerns that you just articulated, Tim, and sort of filter them through probably the most important filter that we have, and that is as Christians. Reflect on those things as a Christian, if you would, answering the question, why should Christians be involved, both in the national level, but more specifically here in Maryland, both as Maryland residents and Maryland conservatives? How would you answer the question, Tim, Jeff? Look, I hear it. I'm with you. It's a lost cause in Maryland. It's too far gone. What would be your answer as a believer to a fellow believer who would say that to you?
Yeah, well, when Christ tells us to love our neighbor, he's not just throwing away, just some saying out there. I mean, that is our calling. And as Christians, we are supposed to bloom wherever we're planted, right? And where you are now, where you happen to be, the community that you're in, the church that you're hopefully in, the school system that you're hopefully in, like, this is where you have the ability to have the most impact. And I think that is a very Christian way of looking at the world. And it is the healthiest way for our republic to have citizens engage. So I think it's both a Christian perspective, and I think it is a perspective that is entirely aligned with the founding of this great nation, which was informed on a Christian perspective. So, look, I just think we need to take that calling very seriously as Christians. And we need to give it an opportunity to grow. And we need to stop looking so much to Washington. And I know I say that as I'm calling into the show from Washington, D.C. But I view our job in Washington as to be kind of a rearguard action, fight against Washington's desire to constantly encroach on the states. And to constantly take over the political discussion. But the real work is to the state level and the community level.
What I hear you saying is that there is no blue state exception to Christ's call.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And to that point, Jeff, I think that is a notion that has infected our national political discourse. So, and you see this coming from both parties right now. When I'm in power, we're going to direct funding to red states in a certain way, but not to blue states in a certain way. Or, we're going to have retributive campaigns against the states that went against us. We now see it in the constant, ratcheting up of political pressure on the gerrymandering issue across states. All of this is really unhealthy. And it's a sign of way too much power in Washington that I am sorry to say we, the American people, have given Washington. And we need to take that back.
The organization is Advancing American Freedom. I'm talking with Tim Chapman, the president of that organization. Tim, If our listeners want to follow you or to get involved or maybe even make a gift to advancing American freedom, how do they do that?
Thank you for that, Jeff. We are at advancingAmericanFreedom.com. You can also follow us at American Freedom on X. I'm on X as well, at Tim Chapman. We'd welcome people following us and learning what we're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Tim, for joining us on Maryland Family Matters today. Thank you for your work in standing for life, family, religious liberty, freedom in our nation's capital, and for your presence here in Maryland. We're just so grateful for your work and grateful for your time today.
The feeling is mutual, Jeff. Keep up the great work, and thank you for having me.